Hello everyone and welcome to the biology lecture series, and today we'll be discussing the topic respiration. So this topic is from the class 10th science book, okay, or this is included in the class 10th science book, okay, and today we'll be discussing all of the topics that is related to this chapter. So initially I will give you a brief introduction about this topic. Now, what is respiration, what is metabolism, and what does metabolism include? Okay, then later on we'll be studying about the process of respiration. Then we will study about the types of respiration. Okay, so there are two types of respiration, anaerobic as well as the aerobic respiration. We'll study about both of these, and then in the later lectures we'll talk about the respiration in plants as well as respiration in lower organisms, and then later on we'll be studying the respiration in higher organisms, which is humans. So today I'll give you a brief idea about the respiration. Now, how can you define respiration? So respiration is the oxidation of the respiratory products. Alright, so respiration includes metabolism. So let's start with the metabolism. So the sum total of all the vital activities, this is known as metabolism. Vital activities means sum total of all the, you can also say the biochemical reaction. Sum total of all the biochemical reactions, these are known as metabolism. And what are biochemical reactions? Reactions that are enzymatically controlled. Okay, means where enzymes act as a catalyst or where enzymes are involved. So there are a lot of reactions which require enzymes. And what are enzymes? Enzymes are basically proteins. So they catalyze the reaction, they speed up the rate of the reaction. And all these biochemical reaction, or you can say the sum total of all the biochemical reactions, it is known as metabolism. Now, metabolism can be of two types. Okay. So there can be two types of this metabolism. One is anabolism, another one is catabolism. And metabolism is the combination of both anabolic activities as well as the catabolic activities. One is anabolism. Okay. Another one is catabolism. Clear? Now, the vital activities, what we were talking about, the vital activities, these are the physiochemical activities of the cell. Okay, physiochemical activity again means all the biochemical reaction, or you can say all the physiological activities that are going on within the cells. So some of the activities can be respiration. Okay, example of some of the biochemical reaction or physiological activities. One such example is respiration. So respiration takes place within the cell. And what is the site of the respiration? It is the mitochondria. So respiration takes place in the mitochondria, which is present within the cell. Alright, if we talk about the plant cell, we can say photosynthesis. The photosynthesis takes place in the organelle known as the chloroplast, which is again present within the cell. Clear? Now, metabolism, it has two aspects. First is the anabolism and second was the catabolism. Now let's discuss about the anabolism. Now, anabolism, this includes the metabolic processes by which the complex cellular compounds, they are synthesized from the simpler compounds. So what is happening during anabolism? It is the formation of the complex compound from the simple compound. So the simple compounds, they combine, okay, they combine together to form the large complex compound. Okay, this is known as anabolism. Now example here is photosynthesis. So in photosynthesis, what are the substrate? So carbon dioxide. Okay, so during photosynthesis, carbon dioxide fixation or carbon dioxide assimilation takes place. And what is the equation for the photosynthesis? Here carbon dioxide, it combines with the water in the presence of what? In the presence of sunlight. So sunlight is required for the process of photosynthesis, as well as chlorophyll is also required. So chlorophyll, this is the photosynthetic pigment that absorbs the light and it converts the light energy into chemical energy. So these carbon dioxide and water, what are these? These are simple inorganic compounds. Okay. So these are simple inorganic compounds. Alright. So carbon dioxide and water, they combine in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll, and it gives rise to what? It gives rise to glucose molecule C6H12O6. So this glucose molecule, this is now a complex or the larger molecule, and it is organic also. So this is complex organic molecule that is formed by the combination of simple inorganic molecules such as carbon dioxide and water. And apart from this, what is formed? Oxygen is also evolved and water is also generated. Okay. If we want to balance this equation, we can write 6CO2 plus 12H2O give rise to one molecule of the glucose, 6O2 and 6H2O. Okay. So here 12 hydrogen plus 12 hydrogen means 24 hydrogen, and here we have 24 hydrogen and carbon 6. So we have 6 carbon. So this is also balanced, and you can see oxygen is also balanced here. Clear? So this is an example of, or you can say photosynthesis is an example of anabolic pathway. Clear? Now here lot of enzymes are also involved. So we can say it is a so these are the physiological reactions or physiological process, or they include biochemical reactions which are catalyzed by the enzyme. Now let's talk about the catabolism. So catabolism is the opposite of anabolism, you can say. Here what happens? So it includes all the metabolic processes in which the larger molecules, they are broken down into the simpler molecules. An example of catabolic pathway, this is respiration. Clear? So let's discuss a little bit about respiration. So this topic is about respiration only. So what happens during respiration? I'll give you a brief idea now. So respiration, you can say, is just opposite of photosynthesis. Okay, so in photosynthesis, oxygen evolution was taking place, and that oxygen is then utilized for the oxidation of the respiratory substrate. So for respiration to occur, what do you need, or what is essential for respiration? For respiration to take place, you need, first of all, the respiratory substrate. So respiratory substrate, these can be of lot of types. So respiratory substrate is that molecule that is oxidized. How can you define respiratory substrate? A molecule that is oxidized. This is known as respiratory substrate. Respiratory substrate can be of, okay, either it can be carbohydrates. Example is glucose. So glucose is the most readily available. So that's why glucose is mostly used up during the respiration, or it is oxidized during the respiration. Okay. If glucose is not available, then other respiratory substrate can be proteins or the fats. Okay, so these three, carbohydrate, proteins and fat, these are the respiratory substrate, and glucose, this is the main respiratory substrate. Okay, if glucose is not available, then proteins and fat will be oxidized to liberate the energy. And from these respiratory substrate, fats, they liberate the highest energy upon oxidation. They liberate highest energy upon oxidation. Okay, this is clear. So respiratory substrate is required for respiration. And if we talk about the aerobic respiration, for aerobic respiration, oxygen is also required. So aerobic respiration takes place in the presence of oxygen. So here oxygen is required during aerobic respiration, and when the respiration takes place in the absence of the oxygen, then it is known as the anaerobic respiration. We'll talk about this in the upcoming slides. Okay, so respiration is a catabolic process. So what happens during respiration? We can understand it with the equation. So respiratory substrate, let's take it, glucose, which is C6H12O6. This will oxidize, means it will combine with the oxygen. Alright, and when it combines with the oxygen, then oxidation of the glucose molecule will take place. Then what are the products from? Carbon dioxide is formed, energy is released, as well as water is also released during this process. So here, if you want to balance this equation, this will 6O2, 6CO2 and 6H2O. So this is the equation for respiration. Here you can see there is a breakdown of the larger molecule, glucose. So glucose is the larger molecule here. Okay, and it is broken down into this simpler inorganic molecules. Okay, so organic molecules are broken down into simpler, or you can say simple molecules, such as carbon dioxide and water. So you can say reverse of photosynthesis is happening here. Alright, and respiration is a catabolic process, you can say. Now, respiration is an important catabolic process responsible for the production of the energy. So energy is released upon the breakdown of these respiratory substrate. Okay, and this energy is released in the form of ATP. What is ATP? ATP is adenosine triphosphate. Alright, so this ATP is then used for carrying out various metabolic processes. Clear? Now let's move on. So how can we define respiration now? So it is the process by which assimilated food is oxidized and energy is released. This is known as respiration. Or in simple way, how can you define respiration? It is the oxidation of the assimilated food, or you can say the respiratory substrate. Okay, oxidation of the respiratory substrate that generates energy. This is known as respiration. So respiration is a very crucial process because it provides energy by the breakdown of the assimilated food. Now usually the respiration takes place in the presence of the oxygen, but sometimes in some conditions Respiration can also occur in the absence of the oxygen, and that is known as anaerobic respiration, also known as fermentation. Clear? There are two types of anaerobic respiration: alcoholic fermentation and lactic acid fermentation. We'll discuss about this in the upcoming slides. Now, in aerobic respiration, the oxygen from the air is taken in, and this oxygen reacts with the food molecules present in the body. What are the food molecules? The glucose and all, okay, proteins and the fats, all right, and they burn them slowly to release the energy. Okay, and I've already told you fats are the molecules that release highest amount of energy. Now, this energy is stored in the form of ATP molecules. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. Okay, ATP is adenosine triphosphate. ATP is also known as the energy currency of the cell. And mitochondria is known as the powerhouse of the cell. Okay, what is energy currency? It is the ATP. So these ATP molecules, okay, these are produced inside the cell and they are further used, okay, and the waste product like carbon dioxide and the water. So during respiration, carbon dioxide and water is also produced. So carbon dioxide is the waste material as well as the water. So this carbon dioxide has to be eliminated out of the body. And how it is eliminated? It is eliminated through lungs. Okay, clear? Now let's move on. So this is a very simple equation showing you the process of the aerobic respiration. Here the food which we have already discussed, it can be carbohydrate, it can be proteins, and it can be fats also. Okay, so these are oxidized, means they combine with the oxygen. This process is known as oxidation. And what are produced? Smaller or simple inorganic molecules such as carbon dioxide and water are produced, and energy is released in the form of ATP. And this ATP can be used to carry out various metabolic processes and various other processes that are vital for the survival of the organisms. So this is known as aerobic respiration. Now here a note, I've given here a note. Now the process by which organism obtain oxygen from the environment and release carbon dioxide produced during oxidation of the food to the outer environment is called as breathing. So you must have seen that during respiration also oxygen is being utilized and carbon dioxide is being produced. But what is happening in breathing also? Breathing also, what is happening? You obtain the oxygen from the environment and you release the carbon dioxide. So how is breathing different from the respiration? So we can say breathing is a part of the respiration. Okay, but what is the difference now between breathing and respiration? So during breathing, there is no release of the energy. Okay, now let's study about the difference between the breathing as well as the respiration. Now breathing, it involves taking in of the oxygen and releasing out of the carbon dioxide. Okay, and this is taking place where? This is taking place in the lungs. So in lungs, the exchange of gases is taking place. Okay, so there is intake of the oxygen and there is release of the carbon dioxide. So it is a physical process. So breathing is a physical process, you can say. Okay, while respiration is a biochemical process. Why? Because here this oxygen is used for the breakdown of the respiratory substrate or the breakdown of the assimilated food. That's why it is known as a biochemical process, and it also involves the enzymes. A lot of enzymes are also involved in these biochemical processes. Okay, while breathing, it only involves the respiration is a biochemical process. Okay, and breathing is a part of the respiration. All right, and in respiration there is oxidation of the food, while in breathing there is no oxidation of the food. Now breathing, it involves the lungs, so it is an organ system level process. While respiration, beside being at the organ system level, also occur at the cellular level. Okay, so I've already told you during breathing what happens, which organ is involved, lungs is involved, but there is no breakdown of the assimilated food. That's why breathing only occurs at the organ system level, or it is the organ system level process, while respiration, it occurs at the cellular level. Okay, at cellular level means within the cells what is present? The glucose molecule is present, and that is oxidized, to release what? Carbon dioxide and water, and that carbon dioxide is later eliminated from the body. Okay, otherwise it will be toxic to the living organism. Now another difference is that during breathing there is no release of the energy, while during respiration there is release of the energy, which is stored in the form of ATP. Okay, so these are the difference between the breathing and the respiration. So what was the first difference? If we talk about the breathing, and then another one is respiration. So breathing, only you can say exchange of gases takes place. Means exchange of oxygen as well as carbon dioxide takes place. But during respiration what happens? You can write exchange of gases, and also what happens? There is oxidation of the food material. And then breathing, it occurs at the organ, it is an organ system level process. Alright, and whereas respiration, what happens? It is an organ system level process and it occurs at two levels. So one is the organ system level and other at the cellular level, means within the cell. So it occurs at two levels, and during breathing there is no energy formation or no ATP formation. Here the ATP is released or ATP is formed. Clear? So these are the difference between breathing as well as the respiration. Now let's study about the types of respiration. So there are three types of respiration: external respiration, internal respiration, and the cellular respiration. Let's first talk about the external respiration. So during external respiration, what happens? There is exchange of gases between an organism and its environment. Okay, environment means the atmosphere. So here there is an exchange of gases between the atmosphere and the organisms. Now, where does this external respiration takes place? So it takes place in the lungs of the terrestrial organism, or you can say gills of the aquatic organisms, where the body absorbs the oxygen from the atmosphere and expels the carbon dioxide. So what is happening here? The oxygen is absorbed from the atmosphere and it enters into the lungs. Okay, now it transports gases from the external environment into the lungs and subsequently into the bloodstream. So what is happening here? So this is the atmosphere, and in atmosphere oxygen is present. This oxygen is taken up by okay, the organisms, and it enters into the lungs, and from the lungs it will then later enter into the blood. So this is what happens in the external respiration. Now next one is the internal respiration. So here the exchange of gases between the tissues and the extracellular environment takes place. So here tissues are involved. Okay, so what happens during internal respiration? So internal respiration, it takes place within the body tissues, where the cells release the carbon dioxide and absorb oxygen from the bloodstream. Okay, so what happens here? The oxygen, if we were talking about the external respiration, so what was happening from the atmosphere? The oxygen reach into the lungs, and from the lungs the oxygen reaches the blood. Now from the blood, the oxygen will enter where? It will enter into the tissues. So here there is an exchange of gases. So tissues produce carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide goes into the blood. Okay, and oxygen from the blood, it enters into the tissues. So this is known as the internal respiration. It is between the tissue cells and the extracellular environment. Now internal respiration, it involves the exchange of gases between the bloodstream and the body tissues. And I have already explained you how the exchange of gases takes place during the internal respiration. Now the third one is the cellular respiration. Okay. So third one is the aerobic, you can say, or the cellular respiration. Here what is happening? Oxidation of the food takes place in the presence of the molecular oxygen. Now, after internal respiration, what is happened? The oxygen has reached into the tissues, or you can say the cells. Now the oxygen is present within the cells, and now the food material, or you can say the glucose, this is present within the cells. Okay. So what does cell contain? They contain the food materials, or you can say they contain the respiratory substrate, and the most common respiratory substrate is glucose because it is readily available. Okay. And then there is the oxidation of the glucose molecule with the help of the oxygen, and what is released? Here carbon dioxide will be formed, water will be formed as waste product, as well as energy is released. So this is happening where? This is happening at the cellular level, or we can say it is happening within the cell, or it is happening at the cellular level. So we can also call it as cellular respiration. Okay. So here you can see food is broken down with the help of the, okay, food is first broken down by the process known as glycolysis. Okay, and at the end of the glycolysis, pyruvic acid is produced, which is a 3-carbon compound. Okay, so you can write food. What is food? Food is a glucose molecule, which is a 6-carbon compound. It is first broken down into pyruvic acid. We'll study about this process glycolysis later on. So 2 molecules of pyruvic acid are produced. So, and pyruvic acid is a 3-carbon compound, and this process is known as glycolysis. So glycolysis is very important process, and it is also a part of the respiration, and it is also a common pathway for both anaerobic as well as the aerobic respiration. Now this pyruvic acid, which is produced in the presence of oxygen, it enters, or it takes part in the Krebs cycle. Okay, and at the end of the Krebs cycle, what is produced? Carbon dioxide, water, and energy is released in the form of ATP, and 38 ATP are formed during the aerobic respiration. Okay, so this Krebs cycle takes place in the mitochondria. So pyruvic acid, it will first, so it cannot directly enter into the mitochondria. So it is first changed into acetyl coenzyme A, and this acetyl coenzyme A can now enter the mitochondria. Okay. And then in mitochondria, what is happening? This acetyl coenzyme A then combines with a 4-carbon compound known as oxaloacetic acid. Okay, this is oxaloacetic acid, also known as oxaloacetic acid, which is the 4-carbon compound. Here we have 2 carbons. Okay, and then what is formed in the end? Citrate. Citrate or citric acid is formed. That's why Krebs cycle is also known as the citric acid cycle. Okay, so this is happening during the aerobic respiration. There are a lot of steps that are involved in the aerobic respiration. I have just given you a brief idea here. Okay, first process is the glycolysis. Then pyruvic acid formed at the end of the glycolysis. Then there is a decarboxylation of this, oxidative decarboxylation of the pyruvic acid, which generates what? Which generates the acetyl coenzyme A. So here the process is known as oxidative decarboxylation. And this process generates acetyl coenzyme A. And this acetyl coenzyme A that enters the mitochondria and it combines with a 4-carbon compound known as oxaloacetic acid and it generates citrate. And then there are a lot of reactions then going on. Okay. So this citrate is the first compound formed in the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle, and then later on citrate also undergo a lot of changes. Clear? So the Krebs cycle, also referred to as the citric acid cycle or the TCA cycle. TCA cycle means tricarboxylic acid cycle. Okay, why tricarboxylic acid? Because citric acid has 3 carboxylic group. That's why it is also known as tricarboxylic acid. Okay, so it is a series of reaction taking place within the mitochondria. Now this cycle is essential for the generation of energy in nearly all the aerobic cells utilizing oxygen. So utilizing oxygen, it produces water and carbon dioxide as the byproducts. So this is a cycle showing you the TCA cycle, okay, also known as the Krebs cycle, though this is the citric acid cycle. Okay, so first was the glycolysis and then pyruvate is formed by the process known as the glycolysis. So at the end of the glycolysis, glucose is converted into pyruvate. Then pyruvate is first converted into acetyl coenzyme A. Then this acetyl coenzyme A takes part in the citric acid cycle. And I have told you acetyl coenzyme A combines with the oxaloacetic acid and the first compound formed is the citric acid. That's why this cycle is also known as citric acid cycle. And then later on, citric acid is converted into alpha ketoglutarate and you can see then succinic acid is formed, malic acid, and then there is the regeneration of the oxaloacetic acid and you can see carbon dioxide is being produced here. Okay, here this carbon dioxide is being produced here at these steps. Here also carbon dioxide is being produced. Okay, and in this process energy is also released. Okay, how much ATP? 38 ATP are released during this process. Now anaerobic respiration, it is of 2 types. So here anaerobic respiration takes place in the absence of the oxygen. It does not require any oxygen. Now there are 2 kinds of anaerobic respiration. One is the alcoholic. So this one is the alcoholic fermentation and the other one is the lactic acid fermentation. Okay, this is known as fermentation also. So what happens during the alcoholic fermentation? Alcohol, ethanol is produced and carbon dioxide is produced and very less amount of energy is produced. You can see only 2 ATP is being produced. Here what is happening? Food is broken down by the process known as first glycolysis will happen. So it will convert the glucose into pyruvic acid. Then pyruvic acid will take part in the alcoholic fermentation or lactic acid fermentation. So here if we talk about yeast, In yeast, alcoholic fermentation takes place, and lactic acid fermentation takes place in the lactic acid bacteria. So one example is lactobacillus, and it also takes place in the muscle cells. Okay, so whenever you do a lot of vigorous exercise, then there is a lack of the oxygen, and pyruvic acid is converted into lactic acid, and carbon dioxide is also released, and again small amount of energy is released. So this is known as lactic acid fermentation. Now respiration can be of 3 types. Okay, cellular respiration, respiration in plants, and respiration in animals. So we'll talk about the cellular respiration first, and then we'll talk about the respiration in plants, and then we'll talk about the respiration in animals. Okay, so we'll discuss all this topic in the next session. Thank you very much for listening.